So I'd just like to welcome you both. It was really lovely to see you, Roger Montgomery and Judith Weir. Thank you for joining us. The particular reason why we've got together today is that we all knew, although I think you two would have known them much better than me, but we all knew the wonderful British significant music couple, Tony Payne and Jane Manning, who sadly passed away within a month of each other. I thought that was a catalyst to talk to you about their legacy, the influence they've had on us. And I was just wondering if I could start with you, Judith, whether you'd like to talk about Jane and Tony and their individual legacies and professional contributions.
Well, I don't know, not everyone will know this, but Jane Manning was a soprano with a remarkably long career. She started off as a school teacher, but she soon was found to have the most wonderful abilities, particularly for new music, but actually for all kinds of music. And so starting really quite a high profile new music singer career, I suppose, in her mid-20s or so, she carried on singing really into her 70s and continued to be active really until her death. And her husband, Tony Payne, they met really quite early on, was a composer and writer about music. And he also worked lifelong. So just in any normal career, a huge number of concerts, articles, compositions, lessons would have been done. But somehow the sum of both of them together was absolutely enormous. They very often traveled together to Jane's foreign engagements and would do residencies, joint residencies. And I think, as we'll hear, that's how you, Celia, and Roger first really encountered them on a university residency that you experienced. But I think it meant that they have the most probably incomparable influence on the widest number of people around the world. They particularly spent time in countries, I'm going to try and list them, but obviously the USA, Australia, New Zealand, Finland in particular, but other, particularly at the earlier part of Jane's career, Germany, Austria, doing all the big radio work. So I could probably spend this whole call talking about their careers, but somehow it was the breadth and the generosity that marks them out with this incredible legacy that they've left.
Yes, that's absolutely amazing. Would you agree with that, Roger?
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't know them as long as Judith did, although it was for a very long time. But yeah, they formed lifelong friendships with so many composers. And Jane was the most incredible correspondent. And she could talk as well. She really
Yes.
loved communicating with people. Yes, yeah. There are many stories about Jane's legendary phone calls. One of them was particularly turned into a piece by the composer Brian Elias, whose answer phone tape in the days when answer phones had tapes was entirely used up by a stream of consciousness phone call. Anyway, he transcribed it. It became a piece called Personal Stereo. But that aside, yes, they're incredible. As Judith said, so generous with their time. Um, Jane, when she first came to the university, and that was my first experience of her, I knew the name, but not very much about it. When I was at university, there were lots of things I sort of knew, but didn't really. Um, I often tried to bluff over what I didn't know. But when Jane was there, she was giving a course on 20th century vocal music, and I don't know why, but I got the sense, as did many other students, that this wasn't just for singers. This was something that was going to be really special, and it was. I don't think, even though York was a really happening place for composition and performance at the time, as you'll remember, um, we had some great lecturers and performers. There was no one who was no one I'd met who was like her at all, with the sheer energy, the constant energy, and the amount of time. It wasn't just during the lectures; it was all the in between times as well. And then, of course, after the project, um, she wrote to various of us and wanted to form her own group, the Minstrels. and the rest is history. But perhaps we'll get on to that anyway.
Oh yeah, no, we'll definitely get onto that. But what is also lovely and running through my mind like a thread from what you've both said is also the incredible sense of fun. You talked about energy and passion and everything, and they just seem to be people who really loved music, contemporary music, and sharing that with community. And the tertiary level thing is the most exciting, isn't it, as well? So they were sharing with people, you know, like us, because we were there, who were actually just ready to soak it all up and get enthusiastic as well.
Yes, indeed. I think they particularly relished, well, fresh people like themselves. You know, they had indeed lifelong friendships with all their contemporaries. It was absolutely extraordinary. But there was always a new generation coming up whom they would befriend and get to know. And again, remarkably, just in the last 2 or 3 years of her active life, Jane still had a whole set of new students from the Guildhall who she was nurturing, you know, not just through the college, but she would give individual coaching and just follow their lives. So it just went on and on. It was a constant process through many, many decades.
Yeah, that's marvelous. And I was thinking about my own personal relationship with them, which almost less York. I mean, I was aware, but I wasn't on that particular course, but sprang into from your Spitalfields Festival event, which was Jane's Minstrels playing there, wasn't that? That's the thing I can remember the most. And Spitalfields was so exciting.
Well, Tony was one of our directors and had been a long-time supporter. And in those days, indeed, it was just a church, and we were putting together what we could, often from the great generosity of the musicians we knew, definitely including Jane's Minstrels members. I dare not think how little that anybody got paid, but you know, yes, I think some of those events were really important. I just met somebody the other day, I won't say who it was, but a known composer who just told me he met his wife at one of our concerts. You know, it was a real social centre for music.
So, what are the things that you'll personally take away, cherish, remember, and maybe are influenced by from the individual and the joint legacies of Jane and Tony?
Well, I think now, especially having had time to reflect, you know, since they passed away, we've a few of us have spent quite a lot of time going through their possessions and their legacy, and it's given us a lot of time to reflect on the time we knew them and a lot of things we didn't know about them, because we're looking at scores, letters, photographs from the very beginning, and even the scrapbooks that Jane's father used to keep when she was still at the Royal Academy studying. We have an enormous history, and I think what I've realised is just how incredibly fortunate we were to have touched with these people who were so easy with everything they gave that you weren't aware sometimes that you were in the presence of such astonishing talent. I mean, and being given the opportunity to do the things we did and make the mistakes we did, because you know, we did quite often blithely say, we'll do this piece and this piece, and we'll program all this, and they had a wonderfully additive sort of attitude to programming. Everything they liked went in there. It wasn't just contemporary music, it was English romantic music or continental, sort of not avant-garde but modernist music like Dalla Piccola or Schoenberg, and even Purcell. Anything they liked they would put in, and they liked a lot. So we'd get chaotic programs sometimes that we would struggle to get in within a normal concert time, and because they were really unconcerned with presentation. I mean, Jane always commanded the stage. She looked fantastic, and you could tell when she walked on. But I didn't, and a lot of us, in the words of a student friend of mine, I had the stage presence of a music stand. And Jane used to try and teach us some stage deportment, but they didn't really mind. That was not important to them at all. And so if we shuffled on, off, moved the stands ourselves, sort of forgot things came on, that really was not important to them. That aspect of performing, it was the music. It was all about the music.
And less about the formality then. So I remember informal. Good way. I mean, not that it wasn't 100% professional standards and beautiful high, excellence, but it's that feeling that it's a little bit less kind of rigid and traditional, and more like family sharing a concert.
Yes, indeed, and I agree with Roger. It was extraordinary the way that you became part of their circle. And I don't want to make that sound like it was a clique. It was just an enormous throng of people who were part of their world. And as he rightly says, then you were sort of a fixture with them. And I look back on it, I owe my career largely to them, just because of that thing of them saying, yes, we'll perform that piece, and then they do it again. And one hopes that more people in the musical world would see that as an example, but actually those people are very few, and even people who had much more capacity to do that than Jane and Tony had, who were after all very much independent workers, just doing their own thing, having their own professional struggles. But I would love to see that spirit more broadly, and I hope by talking about it, we will encourage those people who like to work that way.
And what a lovely sentiment that is. And as well as talking about Judith and we're talking about Jane and Tony, we should also explain that you were both coming from very significant professional positions, and the position of Master of the Queen's Music and all the amazing positions that you hold as well, Roger, including Orchestra of Age of Enlightenment and the Royal Opera House. This is actually, it's also a legacy of that incredible excitement and the amount of challenges that being in something like Jane's Minstrels and being involved with festivals and everything pushes us towards. Like, none of this would happen with complacency, would it? It's always trying to extend yourself and stretch yourself. And then the other thing I remember from them is including the people in their circle, like you say, not a clique. But I just want to say that also have your both your joint professional I'm going to have to edit here. To have your joint professional excellence. It's not just anybody saying this either, is it? That's what I'm trying to get across to the audience, that you are both part of the continuum of British music, and Jane and Tony were leaders in that. What's next?
I think that's it. Maybe Roger and I have been talking about the friendly family side of all this, but they were actually artistic leaders. And I think if someone were to write down what's happened in our musical life in the last decades in this country, and perhaps in Australia too, and the US, Jane and Tony would figure very significantly in the number of people, and I certainly count myself amongst them, who, thanks to them, have gone on to do many other things. Sorry to cut everybody else off, but I think that is the point you're making, indeed.
Yes.